going to pass it on to you.
For sure. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. I'm really excited to be here for this talk. So the title of my talk is Navigating the Intersection Between LLMs and Products. So this is going to be a light product talk that with a lot of LLM elements to it. So I know that all of you guys have had a couple hours of talks and presentations, so feel free to sit, lay back and relax and enjoy a bit about LLMs and products. So I'll get started a bit about me. So my name is Penny. I actually started my machine learning journey 8 years ago in a medical research setting. So this is when I was still using MATLAB, and we needed to manually label those cell data for the model to train. So as you can see, this is an incredibly tedious kind of process, but I definitely really enjoyed it. So from there, I have always had this passion about working in research. So fast forward a bit, I actually got drawn into this field of HCI, so human-computer interaction, because how relatable it is as an user, as an end user. So I almost went to psychology as a side note, but ended up just getting a minor. So then I started my career as a machine learning engineer, focusing on prediction, recommendations, and generation system. So this is where I was still using a lot of RNN, recurrent network, CNN, and so on. I also dabbled a bit about using gesture interactions in AR/VR system. Then I really started my LLM journeys doing NLP and a conversational system research in a smart home setting. So currently I'm an AI product manager at LG Toronto AI Lab. So I know I have a quite a bit interesting journey into LLMs from research, being an engineer, and now a product manager. And I know for the audience, it is mainly LLM researchers and practitioners, but I really want to start my talk with the perspective of products. But not yet. I'm going to show you a picture of my cat because I cannot start my talk without a picture of my cat. He's sleeping right now, but very likely he's going to come and disturb me. So to start, you might have heard about this product mindset, and there are a lot of them out there, many out there. Here, I just want to quickly share 3 that I really emphasize on in my role as a product manager, and hopefully they also would resonate somewhat with you. So what those are? They are rooted in the problem. I'm showing here Jeffrey Moore's value positioning statement. What it is that it's telling us how we should position our product. It should have a unique attributes that brings value to our user, that has a competitive advantage towards our competitors. So the questions that we need to ask ourselves is that what is the business problem we're trying to solve? And whose job does that make it easier? I have an example here. This is a very early stage of Amazon, where they used to be a retail bookseller. So their mission is actually providing instant access to over 1.1 million books. That's unlike traditional booksellers. So it's not just about growth and transactions, retention, and so on. It's about this core business problem they're trying to solve. At the same time, everybody are an user. I'm a user, you're a user. We're developer, engineers, researchers a lot of times, but we're also users in any of the products that we're interacting with. So it is always good to have an empathy to the user and as a user. So I put it as act as a user. What does that mean? So instead of thinking, okay, how do I best optimize this technology or this technique? We should think more on the customer has this problem, but what technique might work better to help me solve it? So here's a quick cartoon picture here. Obviously, the parents and the kid are looking at very different things, depends on the point of view they are. So we wanted to always act as an user and having that empathy in mind. So moving on, there's also the growth mindset. So what it is that we want to start small, but always having scaling in mind. And this obviously applies to both software and LLM products. So think as a whole system. We start with a clear, specific definition of what we want to solve, what we try to solve, and go through this iterative improvement process. And in the case of machine learning, keep in mind that we also have to have all kinds of trade-off between, for example, latency and cost and so on. So from a business point of view, it could also be that we wanted to find new use cases and new business opportunities. So always have that growth mindset. It's also important, building any kind of products in mind. So we have seen in the last year, I say year and a half, AI are taking the world by a storm. So previously, I actually had family members that asked me, like came to me and be like, okay, you work in AI. So what's AI about, let's say iPhone, or what's AI about Instagram, any of the app that they use? So the reason why they ask those questions is because those machine learning systems, such as facial recognitions or recommendation systems, were on sync, right? So in the recent wake of AI, such as ChatGPT, it actually gave those systems a voice or a face. So in the user interface, users can easily interact with using natural language. So then they become this quote unquote AI products that people love and praise. But at the root, we actually want to build impactful products that come with an AI feature. And in today's case, those AI features are based on large language models. So how do we actually apply those three mantras to LLM applications? And what are the questions that we want to ask ourselves? I want to pause for a second and let the audience here to think about the questions that could be asked, especially as an LLM practitioners. So those mantras, again, rooting the problem, act as a user, and growth mindset. So I'll give everybody 1 minute to reflect this. And if you would like, feel free to send the questions that you have in mind in chat. And then I can go through some of the ones that I would ask myself with. So I'll give everybody a minute to just think and reflect those and ask yourself, what are the questions that you would think about when you're building, developing, and deploying an LLM application? And hopefully, if you have any questions, put them in chat as well. All right, I like this from Amir. Does user really needed an LLM to solve their problems? Yeah, this is very connected to both of the rooted in the problem act as a user. Do we really need LLMs? Is there a better solution out there? Or is there a non-AI solution out there? That's something that we always think about. Okay, users need to trust the LLM to provide trustworthy responses. I agree. I actually wanted to quickly touch up on one of the challenges LLM have later in my talk that would actually potentially talk about this question as well. This is a problem that users are actually trying to solve. This is very similar to what we were talking about before. Yeah. Can the problem be solved with rule engine? Yeah, there you go. So sometimes it might not need, a deep neural network or, maybe a rule-based machine learning algorithm could solve the question. Maybe a decision tree could solve the question. It might not need to be a AI model, machine learning model, and especially not a large machine learning model that comes with a lot of challenges and the costs that we have to take into consideration. Can I solve DC Rex and P? Okay, how much data is needed to get started and scale? Yes. Data is definitely a super important question to ask in the LLM application deployment. We're going to touch up on that as well. Okay. Capabilities, access to data, data to be collected. I love all of the questions that we have here. This is like way more than what I thought in my mind. So with that, I think it's fair for us to maybe move on and talk a bit about some of the questions that I would ask myself with. So this is not going to be like a complete list of questions. We can have 100 questions there, but just some of the key ones I really wanted to ask myself before I get started with developing or talking to the engineers about an LLM products. So to start, I think the emphasis is grounding LLMs in real life problems. So to answer the question of what and why and who. So you might ask, what does that mean? So it means that we want to identify the right capabilities. Like mentioned in the chat before, does the LLM model has the right capability to solve the problems we're trying to address? And with that capability, we want to align that with business model or our business goals. Will the LLM model generate a significant business value? Right? So there's always this tension between the capabilities of the LLMs that have and the goals of the product that you aim to deliver to the market. It also means that we want to look at the right user segment to target. So there's the execution feasibility. Do we have the resource and the expertise to actually implement the LLM models? and what is the cost of the system getting it wrong, and what to do in case it does. Some, I think, audience here mentioned about trust, and how would those users interact with those solutions. Then we also need to ask a question around this accuracy, latency, cost trade-off that's around growth, the rapid development time. Can the LLM model be deployed quickly and effectively? And the system integration problem. How should the solution be integrated with the existing system? So there are lots of questions that we want to answer, we want to ask ourselves and get answers. With that in mind, I also wanted to connect them to the challenges that we face currently with LLMs. I'm listing only 16 here, but there are many, many more, and I'm not gonna go through all of them. In the next sections, I just want to highlight some of them that could be detrimental to a product and a business, and potentially some of the ways that we might be able to mitigate them. Okay. First up, we have the data. So LLMs are only as good as the data that are trained on, and they can definitely mirror the biases of the content on which they're trained on. So some has said, I think, that data is this emerging bottleneck of LLM performances. So increasing model parameter counts are not good enough. It only yield marginal gains compared to increasing the size of really high quality training data. So this goes without said how important data is. And I know the audience has showed in the chat before on the questions about data. So I just wanted to have a couple of key points here. There's a lot of different problems with data. How do we mitigate them? What are the solutions are? But just 3 key points to think about from a business product point of view. So we want to first understand what are the data that's available to you in your business and from your user. So if we look at the case of working with documents, you might want to ask, what is the size or the nature of a document collection? Is there any domain knowledge, legal, medical, and so on? How frequently are those documents updated? And what makes your product to really have a strategic edge over the thousands of others in the market is that, that's my cat, is that you want to incorporate your company's proprietary data into the application. So that actually might involve collaborating with subject matter experts to source those high quality, dynamic, and correct data to ensure quality output. And of course, adding those contexts lead to a whole subfield of LLM research, which I will not get into details here. But to ensure that there is always an effective method to capture and utilize prepared data for fine-tuning and keeping such data private, will become, I think, a very great source of having a competitive advantage for your product or business. And as an LLM researcher, I think we always want more data, either structure, unstructures, categorical, user behavior, media, and so on and so forth. But I think what is important is to note that the increasing size of the data set does not always improve LLM's performance. What is incredibly important is actually the quality and diversity of data. So a careful curation of high quality data for both, let's say, fine-tuning and alignments are super valuable. And lastly, when you're updating your model, don't forget you have to update your data as well alongside with them. And then next up, we go into evaluation. So as you can see, I'm going through the 3 stages, the trend, the test, and the inference. So evaluation obviously enables us to measure how well our system or product's doing and detect any regressions. That's why I think defining a good success material and building solid evaluation should be the starting point of any LLM-based system or product. So depending on the task, you might use some standard classification matrix, such as recall, precision, or any of the other matrix, like standard matrix that I have. I would just blanked out for a minute. And I know that previously there was a question actually about that in the previous talk. But also in the case of such as you want a matrix that was referenced based on matching and semantic similarity, you might want to use a different matrix, right? So there's a couple downsides to matrices like this, such as there's poor correlation between those matrices and human judgment, poor adaptations to wider range of tasks, poor reproducibility. Sometimes it even gets different scores with the same model, but based on different implementations. And I know you can also, in the LLM case and a lot of AI model case, you can use benchmarkings, but then they don't actually measure performance on the use case, the specific use case that you wanted to measure on. So the question to ask, actually, in this example, which is a retrieval example, is that, is this given retrieval result relevant? Most of the time, we're actually answering it in the case of if this is relevant to the tasks. But what we should also evaluate on is if it's relevant to the user. So there's always this difference between what you retrieved and what you want to respond to a user. So similarly, there's also this idea of LLM validation that actually focus more on addressing users' need. So instead of asking if LLM is good at just doing a task, we also wanted to ask if it is good at doing the task that users are actually caring about. At the same time, we do not want too much personalization in the process. What that means is that, for example, if we have this valuation data set that consists of mostly similar or redundant documents, the matrix may reflect the system's ability to only retrieve those specific type of the documents well, but not to capture the performance of the broader range of the content. And then for evaluation queries, if those are overly specific or focus on only on particular specific domain, the matrix might not reflect the system's effectiveness in reflecting or retrieving those diverse relevant information across different kind of contexts. So there's also this balance that we wanted to get to, not too much personalization, but enough to consider what users' needs are. I also want to quickly just touch up on this new age of LLM. In order to ship them into production, it is also crucial to consider some responsibility and ethics evaluations. Okay, so with that, I want to talk about a topic that is near and dear to all of the LLM practitioners here, hallucinations. So we all know about hallucination, and we know hallucination is bad, but how bad? So I want to start with some real life cases. All right. So in the first one, you can see Humility lawyers fined for $5,000 for submitting ChatGPT hallucinations in court. So this lawyer in question actually copied the output from ChatGPT in a court filing, make references to various cases in supporting up his arguments, but only find out that those cases don't exist. I think most of you guys probably have already heard this. So they actually relied on the outputs of ChatGPT without verifications. Actually, like, this is what a lot of people has brought into this tendency of Gen AI system to hallucinate, and public started to notice more about it. So you might have to say, oh, this is some individual use case where this dumb lawyer does not actually know how to use ChatGPT correctly. But it actually has huge impact to the business as well. So starting from this case where a chatbot from the dealership recommended a car from a competitor's company. And so this dealership actually recommended a Ford instead of their own cars. And a bigger case, this is very, very recent, end of February this year, Air Canada being fined in court for their chatbot's hallucination with providing false policy. So instead of giving them the good policy, the user is asking for a policy question, and then instead of giving the right one, they gave them the false one. That results in the user not being able to get the refund afterwards. So that went to court, and Air Canada was fined for it. And subsequently, that results them to close down the chatbot function altogether. So Yang LeQuan, a key figure in the field of deep learning, has expressed his view on this, and he said something along the line that large language models have no idea of the underlying reality that language describes, adding that most human knowledge is non-linguistic. So it's about how we see things, hear things, smell things, and so on. So we all know that AI will be run, right? I should have an empty slide here, not to show everything, but we all know that AI will be run, and we in the industry will have to identify this kind of sweet spot of confidence level of how to productionalize something, but it still creates value without losing the user interest and user's faith. So with that, I want to first click back to what I've already discussed, which is data, data, and data. So we want to build a faithful data set and make sure our model always ingests the right data. And on top of that, with relentless iteration in the development process, we want to add more and more good quality and diverse data to combat hallucinations. But in the company level, there's also this question of who gets to see what. Not all data in an enterprise need to be shared or meant to be shared with everybody in the company. So access control management actually provide the LLMs with context on who the user is and the type of content to which they should have access. So this is actually quite crucial in an enterprise level to prevent unintended disclosure of private or sensitive information. Another interesting tactic is source citation, and I actually came up with this idea, not the idea, the term myself, but I read it somewhere. So what it is that rather than relying solely in the model's internal process, could we actually serve a trail of sources alongside of the response? So this enhances transparency and empowers the user to trace the origins of the generated content. So somebody like me, I always wanted to know where this comes from. I wanted to do my own due diligence. So we add that accountabilities and give users a chance to take things in their hands. And that could be very much applicable in the finance, medical, journalism settings. Last, to control hallucination with a product mindset, as mentioned, AI will be wrong, and we cannot tackle everything at once. So dependent on the user needs, I think it's very important to choose what to solve first in a very user-specific phased approach. So we don't have to solve everything altogether. We don't want to make sure we want to, but we don't need to make sure everything is like 100%, but to choose what is the most important, what is the key pinpoint that we want to solve for the user. Lastly, we have reliability and stability, which sounds like only for inference for production, but actually affects all stages of LLM development. So lots of times, based on the use cases, researchers will swap and compare different LLMs or combine them together in a chain. So we need kind of like a holistic picture of how we can build things that is bigger, but not just the sum of all of the parts combining together somewhat. So some of the things that we might want to keep in mind are, for example, how effective are the risks that are reduced, the cost and latency of implementation and running in production, how well does this pipeline work on a very specific use case that we have versus a generic use case, how do I control over model output, how easy is this system use, and so on and so forth. And we also want to focus on the stability in production. So while we are all experimenting with LLMs and building an MVP, I know you're doing that, I'm doing that, a lot of people outside of doing that. This is very easy and straightforward at this point. But deploying them into production actually needs a lot more greater considerations into it. So it is a good approach, in my opinion, to take it as a software system design way, such as implementing CI/CD, having good serving choices, and even consider caching to reducing latency and cost, but obviously caching safely because users' data are on our hand. Then to continuously improve those performances, we also wanted to potentially consider having user and product analytics. I know those are very general things to do with products, but we also wanted to have those analytics on LLMs as well. Okay. So what should we focus on for the future of LLM products? And there are many, given the challenges I've said and many things that I've heard about. But I've listed a few that I think could be exciting. First is LLMs on edge. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is in the context of my company, which is LG Electronics, and we focus a lot on the consumer electronics business. The question is not to build the best LLM out there or the best performing LLM out there, although that's a go, but to make sure they are task specific and fits on edge. And in this case, we're not talking about, phone as an edge device, watch as an edge device that actually have somewhat a good computing resource, but things like fridges and TVs, home appliances that have very limited hardware support. And here in North America, I know we largely focus on English language models, but me coming from China, and I actually work for a Korean company, it is also very exciting to see the development of some large non-English language models for local use. There's also this questions about including low resource languages that are largely spoken, but have very limited textual data out there to be able to train the model on. in an enterprise setting, it is also very interesting for me to see the different layers of auditing LLMs that need to be to go through before and after production. And wait, oh, you think I'm done, but not yet. One last thing, it's the money, it's the cost, it's the cash dollar. Okay, so we all know that developing LLMs are super costly in this new AI economies. But being able to afford it does not mean it is sensible to do it. Okay, so I know like some of the folks here might come from a bigger enterprise company that has that kind of money and scale to be able to do it. However, for example, an LLM-powered search, it is economical, feasible, and profitable to do it at this point, but does not mean that it is sensible. So adding that AI functionality to an existing search engine that was already, for example, 100 billion search revenue cost, mine means adding 10 billion additional cost. That is 10% of their revenue. So those costs are very important to be considered when you're building a product or building a business. And those costs can be everywhere. So I'm listing a few. There's training, foundational model, API, there's cloud compute, data acquisition, human in the loop, and so on. And something that we might thought about is there's also energy costs, water, and the environmental costs that comes with it. Sometimes as a researcher, we might be very fixated on building the best performing model possible, but overlooking the price that actually comes with it. So I believe it is important to root everything that we're building here to the business problem that you're really trying to solve and consider what the users actually need. Start small and simple, but plan to scale with an iterative development process for the future. At the end of the day, I believe AI is a mean, it's a tool, but it is not a must. Not everything needs to be AI. Thank you. This is the end of my talk, and feel free to reach out. This is my link in here. I would love to connect with all of you guys here. And yeah, I'll take some questions.